8. Dottie May. The Republic P47D Thunderbolt, or the Dottie May, was the final USAA aircraft lost in European combat during World War II. It was found in Austria's Lake Trounsey on June 13, 2005. The striking plane was used in battle for the first time by the USAAF 9th Air Force's 511th Fighter Squadron's 405th Fighter Group on December 16, 1944. Before getting lost in the Trounsey months later in 1945, on the day of the last war, it flew nearly 90 combat missions. To raise morale, the pilot attempted a low-level flight over an Austrian concentration camp at Ebensee. It seems like his confidence may have overcome him since he flew the fighter so low that its propellers hit the water, sending the vehicle crashing into the lake. The Thunderbolt sank quickly, but the pilot was able to leave the cockpit alive. The P-47D was not seriously hurt, but it stayed at the bottom of the lake until it was finally brought to the surface in April 2005 by Brian Kenny and the Austrian company Sandy Air Corps. A company called Vintage Airframes in Caldwell, Idaho, then restored Dottie May to flawless flying condition. The Allied Fighters Group at the Chino Airport now owns the Thunderbolt. 7. 3,000-year-old Canoe. The oldest boat ever found in the Great Lakes region is an indigenous dugout canoe used 3,000 years ago. It was recently discovered in Wisconsin's Lake Mendota, together with Wisconsin Native nations. The canoe was taken out after it was located in scattered fragments across the lake bed. The 14.5-foot-long, 4.4-meter canoe was found near the same spot a 1,200-year-old entirely intact vessel was spotted last November. According to the historical organization, it was carved from a single piece of white oak. There were tribal representatives from the Bad River tribe and Ho-Chunk Nation at the time of the canoe retrieval. Preservationists are restoring the boats now with a process that will take 2 years. James Skibo, the Society's state archaeologist, described the discovery of a second historically significant canoe in Lake Mendota as truly incredible, and even said that this find unlocks invaluable research and educational opportunities to explore the technological, cultural, and stylistic changes that occurred in dugout canoe design over 3,000 years. Thorough investigation will reveal if the canoes were once close to sunken villages. The second discovery was barely 100 yards or 91 meters from the first, hinting at the possibility of an ancient settlement. Ho-Chunk Nation President Marlon White Eagle stated that the discovery of the canoe will give solid proof that Tejop, 4 Lakes, has been occupied by Native Americans for thousands of years. He will also prove that their society developed reliable means of transportation, trade, commerce, and more. 6. 10,000-year-old woolly mammoth. In 2020, after successfully removing bones from the bottom of a Siberian lake, Russian scientists were able to examine the exceptionally well-preserved remains of a 10,000-year-old woolly mammoth after being uncovered by locals. Experts spent 5 days searching the lake in the isolated Yamal Peninsula. The remains included tendons, skin, and even excrement. During 2 excursions, almost 90% of the animal was finally recovered. Such discoveries are becoming more frequent in Siberia as a result of climate change that's warming the Arctic faster than other regions of the globe, and melting the ground in areas that have been covered in permafrost for thousands of years. The adult woolly mammoth, which was most likely a male between the ages of 15 and 20 and stood about 10 feet or 3 meters tall, will be named Tadebe after the family who first discovered it. The animal was preserved in an unusual way, with its lower spine still joined by tendons and skin. But the recovery process was extremely difficult thanks to the disorganized state of the other bones. The team guessed that the bones were likely still in their original anatomical sequence, but the first and second days of the trip revealed that only the back of the skeleton was truly accurate. The coprolite, or animal waste, is of some special importance since it contains information about the animal's nutrition at the time it lived. as well as pollen and further environmental hints. Since the bones of the mammoth showed no indications of trauma, the cause of its death is still unknown. In Russia, scientists have found other mammoth remains that date back up to 30,000 years. 5. 16th century church. In 2015, a 450-year-old church surfaced from the bottom of a Mexican water reservoir, like something out of a folktale. In the state of Chiapas, where drought has set records, receding waters have exposed ruins of a 16th century church. A group of Dominican monks constructed the building, also known as the Temple of Quechula, back in 1564. Since the church was close to a major highway, the missionaries thought it would be the heart of a bustling town. But after a string of plagues between 1773 and 1776, they decided to leave the area altogether. When a neighboring dam on the Grijalva River was finished in 1966, the Nezahualcoyotl Reservoir was formed, and the Quechula remains were submerged. A severe drought has since caused the reservoir's surface to dip by over 82 feet, or 25 meters, exposing the church's upper walls. Since the dam was finished, the church has only shown up twice. The first time in 2002, when water levels were so low that people could even enter the building. Another noteworthy aspect of the Temple of Quechula is its rich ties to Bartolomé de las Casas, the head of the monks who first oversaw its construction. De las Casas supported the enslavement of indigenous people while serving as the first bishop of Chiapas, but later changed his mind and promoted abolition. The New Laws of 1542, which temporarily outlawed slavery in the New World, were made possible thanks to Las Casas' effort to persuade King Charles V into signing them. 4. Skeleton Lake. Rupkund, a lake with a depth of about 3 meters, 9.8 feet, is well known for the countless ancient skeletons found along the lake's side. When the snow melts, human skeletal remains are exposed at the bottom. Scientific research has since revealed that the bones belonged to 3 distinct groups of people who died in 2 separate events. One around 800 CE, and the other near 1800 CE. The lake was appropriately named Skeleton Lake. In 1942, Hari Kishan Madwal, a forest warden for the Nanda Devi National Park, discovered the bones. They were far too old to be from Japanese soldiers, which refuted British officials' concern that they were victims of a covert Japanese invasion force. During the month's ice melts, the bones are visible in the shallow lake's clear water. They were located alongside wooden artifacts, iron spearheads, leather shoes, and rings. About 30 skeletons were excavated by a National Geographic crew in 2003. Some even still had flesh on them. According to local legends, while traveling to the temple of Nanda Devi with his pregnant wife, Rani Balampa, their attendants, a dancing company, and more, Raja Jasdaval, the king of Canoe, faced a severe storm with enormous hailstones, causing the entire party to die close to Rupkund Lake. Since the discovery was made during wartime, it was immediately assumed that these remains were Japanese spies who had died in India after exposure to the elements. An investigation team was dispatched by the British government to find out whether this was true, since they were afraid of a possible Japanese land invasion. The bones were too young though, and after closer inspection, it was determined they did not belong to Japanese soldiers at all. Numerous scenarios were put forth, like a pandemic, landslide, or ritual suicide. No one has been able to solve the Skeleton Lake mystery for decades. 38 skeletons were given recent DNA tests, which revealed that they belonged to 3 genetic groupings. 23 of them had ties to individuals in modern-day India. 1 was of Southeast Asian descent. Most surprisingly, 14 were Eastern Mediterranean. A Greco-Indo kingdom may have existed there during the 1st and 2nd centuries BC, which might help to explain this. But according to carbon dating results, none of the bones are from recent times. Those of Mediterranean origin derived from a single event in the 18th century, whereas those of South Asian descent date from separate occurrences between the 7th and 10th centuries. This suggests that the causes of death were different, along with the time period in which they happened. Ultimately, it remains unclear how the bones of Rupkund came to be, since there is no definitive proof pointing towards a solution. 3. Nazi fleet. A recent heat wave in Europe and falling water levels in the Danube River have exposed battleship wrecks from a Nazi German flotilla that was purposely destroyed during World War II. One of 10 nations the Danube passes through between Western Germany and the Black Sea is Eastern Serbia, where the ruins of 20 vessels are currently visible near the town of Prahovo. The government of Serbia has plans to remove several wrecks since they hold unexploded munitions that could pose a threat to nearby fishermen, river traffic, and wildlife. The potentially explosive battle wrecks, though, provide a bigger threat than usual. As sea levels drop, some are now visible above the receding water lines and have turrets, command bridges, shattered masts, and more. On the instructions of the fleet's commander, Rear Admiral Paul Willy Zieb, of the Kriegsmarine, Germany's navy from 1935 to 1945, up to 200 vessels were purposefully destroyed in the Danube at Prahovo before the end of 1944. After August 1944, Zieb commanded a convoy of warships, troops, and civilians from Black Sea districts up the Danube as they fled the Soviet military's advance through Romania. But Battle Group Zieb came under heavy fire from the Soviet-held shore to the north, and at the end of September 1944, Zieb ordered the ships to be sunk at Prahovo after an unsuccessful attempt to enter German territory by fighting through a long gorge known as the Iron Gate, which is about 20 miles upstream. Additionally, he gave the order for his men to walk to Belgrade, which at the time was under German military authority. Zieb's plan was to purposefully scuttle the German battleships in zigzag formations to at least impede the Soviet approach. But it had little overall effect. And by May 1945, Nazi Germany had surrendered to the Soviet Union and the Allied forces. 2. Rock Lake Pyramids. According to legend, there are ruins of a 200-foot-long, 61-meter rock figure and ancient pyramids at the bottom of Rock Lake, a popular fishing spot in the community of Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Those who embrace the tradition suggest that before the region was flooded in the 1800s, pre-Columbian people built these structures on the site. The unusual pyramid was initially discovered in the early 1900s, when Claude and Lee Wilson reported their ore hitting a sizable building 6 feet (1.8 meters) below the water's surface. The men then made unsuccessful attempts to find the obstruction. Divers at Rock Lake, USA saw a peculiar underwater object again in the middle of the 1930s. This time, a geology professor and head of the Wisconsin Historical Museum took notice. Alex Max Gene Knoll, an engineer and diver, ultimately found the building in 1937. He was shocked to see that it was indeed a pyramid. The public's interest in the topic was also revived. No scientist or archaeologist, though, would take it seriously. The lake is thought to be 10,000 years old, which means the pyramid beneath it is older. The first drawing of the structure popped up in 1967, 30 years later. In the next few decades, the lake's contents were mapped using a combination of diver drawings, images, and sonar readings. There are at least 10 monuments below ground, according to Frank Joseph, who has written 2 books about the topic. So far, 2 of these sites have been mapped out. The biggest, with dimensions of roughly 100 feet, 30.5 meters in length, and 18 feet, 5.4 meters in height, has been dubbed the Limnatus Pyramid. Just 3 miles, or 4.8 kilometers away from Rock Lake, lies the ancient Native American settlement of Aztalan. At the site, there are 2 pyramids with identical shapes enclosed by a high wall. This offers a rough notion of the origins of these structures. Aztalan State Park has recently been designated a national landmark. 1. Old Detroit. Old Detroit was declared legally abandoned in 1955, and the U.S. government forced all residents to leave. A new reservoir in Marion County, Oregon, soon engulfed everything that had been left behind as water quickly surged in. The town and its surroundings were then renamed Detroit Lake, and it's still being used to supply water to Salem, the state's capital, and other local cities. Structures that had been submerged for a very long time were once again exposed in 2015, when the lake hit a record low, 143 feet below capacity. A 19th century utility wagon lying on its side in the mud was one historical artifact discovered. The Milburn Wagon Company of Toledo, Ohio, was identified by an intact cast iron plate still on it, and historians estimated its age to be about 130 years. Due to the low oxygen atmosphere at the lake's bottom, it remained in perfect condition. Its location was kept a secret by those who viewed it, so it was probably harmed more severely by its brief contact with air and sunshine than by spending a century underground. Thanks for watching. What's the wildest thing you've seen at a lake? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe. See you soon!